Hi, everyone, this is the Encyclopedia channel. The book that this program interprets for you is The Wisdom of Finance, Discovering Humanity in the World of Risk and Return. The author of this book is a professor at Harvard Business School, Mihir A. Desai. His areas of research are finance, tax law, and entrepreneurship. Every year during the graduation season, Harvard Business School has a fixed activity, which is to give their MBA, Master of Business Administration, graduates the last lesson. In this class, there is no prescribed teaching content, and the teacher can decide what to tell the students. In 2015, the author received an invitation to give a final lecture to the MBA graduates of that year. At the beginning, he planned to stay in his comfort zone and talk to the students about some familiar topics, such as how to understand and reverse the trend of share repurchase in the United States at that time. But later, when he told a friend of his decision, he fell silent. This half-hour of silence was like a knock on the author's head. After returning, he fell into reflection. He asked himself, "Do you really think this is the life motto that students need when they graduate? If you are a student, do you think you need this?" After careful consideration, he decided to get out of his comfort zone, give up those familiar data and models, and talk to the students about how to pursue a better life. For a long time, many people have believed that finance is far from the lives of ordinary people. But in fact, finance itself is a tool invented by people to make their lives better, and many concepts in finance, of course, can also be inspiring to our lives. Later, the author found many similarities with financial concepts in a large number of humanistic works and social reality. And in the last lesson he gave, he talked with everyone about how financial concepts can help us pursue a better life. The results were well received. So after that class, he did more research around this topic, and this is the book Finance and Life we are going to talk about today. The book covers a lot of interesting life topics, for example, how to do a good job of risk management for your own life. Why are the relationships that help us most probably not those closest friends? How do you know how much value you have created in your work? How to better manage intimacy, etc. Our interpretation of this issue is divided into three parts: life, work, and love. In the first part, how the concept of risk management in finance can guide our daily life. In the second part, we will talk about how the views on value creation in finance can inspire our work. In the third part, we will talk about what truths about love we can see from corporate mergers and acquisitions in the financial market. First part. How does the concept of risk management in finance guide our daily life? The financial attitude towards risks can be seen everywhere, and we can never eliminate the existence of risks, but we can manage risks and reduce them to a range that we can bear. In finance, one of the most famous risk control strategies should be to diversify investment. Its principle, as we all know, is to allocate your funds to diversified investment projects as much as possible, so as to avoid the large fluctuations in income of one loss, all losses. But how was this tactic discovered? What role can it play in our lives? These, many people may not know. In fact, at a very early time, people began to apply this strategy in fields other than finance. The core of thought is very simple, which is what we are all familiar with: don't put all your eggs in one basket. For example, in the era of maritime trade, people would put goods on several ships and choose different waterways to prevent excessive losses at one time. However, the diversification strategy used in the financial field is not based on simple intuition, but has undergone rigorous mathematical demonstration. In classic finance textbooks, we will see proofs like this. Suppose you have $10 and you have two investment plans. The first is to invest all $10 in stock A. The second plan is to invest $5 in stock A and $5 in stock B. Assuming that the rate of return of stock A and stock B is both 8%, then after calculation, we will find that the rate of return of the two options is the same, but the risk of option 2, that is, the volatility of earnings, is lower than that of option 1, that is to say, diversification of investment can help you reduce risk while maintaining the same income. Moreover, if we continue to add more and more different stocks to the portfolio, the risk of this portfolio will continue to decrease until it falls to the same level as the overall market risk. At this time, the risks of individual stocks have been completely dispersed. The authors say this strategy is especially effective when used with our most precious resources, time, and energy. The book mentions that the famous basketball player Stephen Curry, when he was young, did not devote all his energy to basketball as many people think, but participated in baseball, football, track and field, rugby, and other competitions. This kind of experience helped him develop relatively comprehensive physical skills, and also helped him reduce the risk of injury, because he can change his various body parts and not overuse one or a few. Like this, the strategy of dispersing investment energy in life is especially important in the early stages of life, because when you don't know what you are good at, betting on your intuition is likely to go astray, and diversifying your energy allows us to first observe which field of investment has the highest rate of return, and then tilt towards this field. From the perspective of the entire life cycle, this is actually a kind of risk management. It's not over yet. If we have a deeper understanding of the diversification investment strategy, we will find that there is another point worth noting, that is, in order to reduce the risk as much as possible, when you choose a new asset to add to the asset portfolio, you should try to choose assets that are relatively different from the existing assets. For example, stocks in different industries are more different than stocks in the same industry. Adding bonds to a stock portfolio is more different than adding stocks. As such, choosing assets with greater divergence can reduce the risk of the entire asset portfolio to a greater extent. So, what can this point bring to our life? The author believes that we need to pay special attention to this when building our own interpersonal network. Because usually, after we go to work, many of the friends we make are people in the same industry and circle. This is also very natural. After all, with these people, we have more contacts and have more common topics. However, from the perspective of diversified investment, in addition to these people, we should not ignore those who are in different circles, different industries, and different ideas from ourselves, and we should even consciously devote more time and energy to maintaining these weekly relevant personal connections with ourselves. Because communicating with these people can not only broaden our horizons, but also bring unexpected opportunities when our career is at a low point. To put it bluntly, if your friends come from all walks of life and all circles, then the roads you can walk will be woven into a transportation network extending in all directions, and the risk of going nowhere when encountering difficulties will be greatly reduced. We can also use a thinking model in finance to understand this problem more systematically. In the financial market, people will use the beta value to express the degree to which the fluctuation of the return rate of an asset is affected by the overall fluctuation of the market. For example, a company's stock has a beta value of 1.5, which means that if the market rises by 10%, it will rise by 15%. If the market falls by 10%, it will fall by 15%. Therefore, the higher the beta value, the greater the extent to which the asset will fluctuate in line with the overall volatility of the market. The author reminds that in life, we should also pay attention to identifying high beta assets, low beta assets, and negative beta assets in our lives. High beta assets are those who follow the ups and downs of your fortune, come or go, or are only willing to stay with you when it is profitable. Low beta assets are those who are always willing to stick to you no matter what your situation is. The author believes that compared with high beta assets, low beta assets and negative beta assets are often easily overlooked, but in fact, they are the high-value friendships that deserve our attention. Each of us should constantly ask, am I investing too much time in my high beta assets? Am I paying enough attention to those low beta and negative beta assets in my life? You are also welcome to share your thoughts on these two issues in the comment area. The second part. Next, let's talk about how value is created from the perspective of finance. And what inspiration can this bring to our work? At work, we get wages from the boss, and then create income for the boss through our own labor. In the financial market, what investors and fund managers are doing is also a similar logic. Fund managers get funds from investors, and then create income for investors through their own labor. So, how to measure the value created by a fund manager? The first thing to be clear is that every investor will have an expected return in mind when handing over his funds to others. For example, if you put your money in the bank, you expect to get a few % interest in 1 year. If you put your money in a fund, you also have an expectation for the future rate of return of the fund, such as 10%, based on the past performance of the fund. Then, if the rate of return of the fund manager is exactly 10% after 1 year, then from the investor's point of view, they will not feel that the fund has created value for themselves. And if the yield is 8%, they will probably still feel that they are losing money. Value creation exists only if the return exceeds expectations, say 15%. This logic is also easy to understand, because we have to calculate the time cost in our minds when we invest any money. If you feel that getting 100 yuan now is as satisfying as getting 110 yuan a year later, then this 10 yuan is equivalent to the time cost in your heart. From another perspective, it is what we said earlier, the income expectation. The author said that every fund manager has to face a cruel but true logic, that is, if your income just meets investors' expectations, then you have not created any value beyond the cost of funds. Moreover, the author believes that it is similar in work. If the benefits you bring just meet the expectations of your bosses, then in their eyes, you have not created any additional value. If you want to create value, then the benefits you bring must be greater than their expectations. This actually inspires us in two ways. On the one hand, it is to strive to generate income, of course it goes without saying. On the other hand, you must learn to manage your boss's expectations. For example, when you are not absolutely sure about a task, don't easily express your determination to make a promise. When you don't have enough confidence in a certain skill of yours, don't show your edge easily. Also, before taking on a risky project, pay attention to the probability of less than expected returns or even losses, evaluate the maximum possible loss amount, and communicate these risks clearly to your boss in advance. Practices like this are all about managing expectations. In addition, there is another corollary to the value creation principle we just mentioned. That said, it's not ideal if you only occasionally exceed your funder's expectations. The best value creator should be able to continuously bring benefits beyond expectations. So, how can this be done? The author's suggestion is to never stop investing in yourself, and to keep increasing your investment. In this way, under the effect of compound interest, your growth will be faster and faster. As for how to invest in yourself, this book does not go further. However, for this problem, we think it is to keep learning. It's also a major way to invest in yourself. Speaking of learning, there are two ways of learning here. The first is random learning, that is, you don't need to spend a whole block of time, but think more deeply and ask more questions about the information you get anytime, anywhere. The second way is systematic learning. That is to use spare time and pay extra money to study systematically in a certain field. For example, after serving as the secretary of the board of directors of a listed company, a person sorts out his knowledge structure and finds that he is relatively proficient in financial and investment banking-related knowledge, but knows little about law, public relations, and media knowledge that may be used by the secretary of the board of directors, so he goes to a postgraduate law student, and also takes courses in public relations and how to write media articles. He believes that compared to random learning, it is a learning method with higher investment efficiency to make targeted supplements according to one's own knowledge structure. From the superior's point of view, when his impression of you is still in the past and he thinks that you can only undertake some work within the scope of the original knowledge, you suddenly show him a larger circle of competence and more possibilities. This is undoubtedly a value increment beyond expectations. And if a person is always able to not be satisfied with the status quo and invest in himself through learning, then such moments of exceeding expected value will continue to appear in his career. In addition to the learning of explicit knowledge, in life and the workplace, many hidden capitals also require us to consciously improve through self-investment. Such as communication, conversation, clothing, posture, etiquette, emotional stability, and so on. Of course, compared with explicit knowledge, the promotion process of these implicit capitals is a slower process, which requires us to give more patience and polish repeatedly in practice. However, it is also a process that can provide lasting benefits for our careers. In the workplace, when explicit knowledge is at a similar level, those who can bring more value beyond expectations are often those who pay more attention to implicit capital accumulation. The third part. How to apply financial wisdom to our love life. Let's start with a story. The book calls this story the love story of Pear Blossom and Begonia. Haitang is a young girl in full bloom, and Lihua is a middle-aged man with a successful career. Pear Blossom is 20 years older than Begonia. Before they met, Lihua experienced 2 failed marriages and felt physically and mentally exhausted. At that time, Haitang already had a lot of fame because of her beautiful appearance, but she knew that youth was fleeting, and she needed to find a stable home for herself. After meeting Pear Blossom, Begonia started a passionate pursuit. Paris, Beijing, New York, and many other cities have left their dating figures. During the conversation, the two found that they had the same values. Then, soon after, the two decided to get married. The news of their engagement was reported by the New York Times and other major media, which aroused a lot of attention. However, not long after their marriage, the relationship between the two began to crack. Liwa finds that Haitang has a tough personality and often backtracks on key promises. Haitang also dislikes Liwa's way of doing things too old-fashioned. Their love for each other is like a whirlwind, coming and going quickly. In just 1 year, their marriage fell into a serious crisis, but they are still making do at this time. After 8 years in this way, the two finally came to the step of divorce. This love story that started beautifully ended in such a dismal way. Speaking of which, it's time to reveal the secret. In this story, the whole process of Lihua and Haitang from falling in love, to getting married, and then to divorce is actually the storyline of the merger between Time Warner and AOL about 20 years ago. And, the authors say, the drama of the reality only increases. UA, Time Warner Corporation, was a traditional media company at the time, with a business scope spanning the publishing, film and television industries. Haitang, also known as America Online, was a fast-growing internet service provider at the time. They decided to merge into one company, AOL Time Warner, in 2000. The merger attracted worldwide attention at the time. The combined company has a market capitalization of $350 billion. However, after the merger, there were many problems in the operation of the company, and the market value continued to decline. By 2009, the company was still split back into the former two. And the overall market value lost more than $200 billion. The author believes that in this failed merger case, we can see the most common reasons for the failure of corporate mergers and acquisitions. And these reasons are actually very similar to the reasons that lead to the failure of some marriages. So, what lessons can we learn from the marriage of AOL and Time Warner? First and foremost, don't go into a marriage hastily. From the initial contact between Time Warner and AOL to the decision to merge, it only took 2 months, and the subsequent merger process also advanced at a rapid pace. A large part of the reason for this is that Time Warner's CEO at the time, Jerry Levine, was about to expire and was eager to make some big things to be proud of, and America Online CEO Steve Case was also very anxious to promote this merger, because he knew in his heart that although the company's current valuation is very impressive, it is difficult to sustain it, and it is necessary to marry out while it is now in its prime. Therefore, at that time, they hardly followed any advice, whether it was the advice from inside the company or the advice of external consultants, and they did not consult. Another lesson related to this is that it is important to fully understand the other person's background. Before the merger, Time Warner failed to do due diligence on AOL. As a result, after the merger, it was discovered that AOL had serious accounting fraud and overbeautified its financial statements. This situation is very common in corporate mergers and acquisitions. After all, which acquired company does not want to get a purchase price as high as possible? However, from the perspective of the acquirer, if the due diligence is not done well, it is easy to trust the wrong person. For example, when Hewlett-Packard acquired Autonomy, it spent $11 billion, but later found that its value was only about $1 billion. In addition, another lesson is that you can't expect too much, and you can rely on the strengths of the other party to make up for your own shortcomings. As a traditional media company, Time Warner has been trying to integrate into the digital media era. They thought that the acquisition of AOL would quickly make up for the company's lag in technological reform. But the reality is that it is difficult to integrate the company's existing media resources with AOL's internet services, and the effect is not ideal. Although many business mergers are for the purpose of complementing resources, it does not mean that when you acquire a company or merge with a company, the other party's superior resources will become your own. Even if you take supplements, due to different personal constitutions, the degree of digestion of supplements will be different, not to mention the running in between two independent individuals. This involves many issues such as resource integration, personnel integration, and collaborative adaptation. It is not a simple transplant. In addition to these, the book also mentioned other problems such as different corporate cultures, underestimation of integration costs, unequal status of both parties during the merger, and lack of care in the management and operation of the merged enterprise. You will find that if you regard a company as a person, in fact, many of the problems we have mentioned now will also appear in love life. Of course, we can also see many happy marriages in corporate mergers and acquisitions. For example, in the 1920s, General Motors acquired Fisher Body Company. Before 1916, General Motors began purchasing automobile bodies, the skeleton of the car, from Fisher Body Company. At that time, the body material was still mainly wood. Wooden bodies were easier to manufacture and modify, so Fisher Body did not have to design individual bodies for GM, but simply modified them from existing models. Later, around 1919, more and more cars began to feature all-metal bodies, and General Motors was no exception. However, the manufacturing difficulty of the all-metal body is much higher, and each style must have its own specific model equipment and manufacturing plant. Therefore, GM re-signed the contract with Fisher. Fisher invested a huge sum of money to build a special closed metal body for GM. In the next few years, closed metal bodies became more and more popular with consumers, and GM's demand for Fisher bodies was also increasing. So I asked Fisher if we could build a dedicated factory near GM's factory. However, Fisher was worried that once such a large cost was paid, he might be in a handled position in subsequent cooperation, so he rejected GM's request. Later, as the business relationship between the two parties became closer and closer, GM felt that this kind of separation of two places, high transportation costs, and frequent signing of various contracts could no longer bear it. Therefore, in 1926, GM proposed a merger with Fisher Body Company, and Fisher agreed. You will find that the story of GM and Fisher is an example of getting to know each other, falling in love, and finally walking into the palace of marriage cautiously after weighing the pros and cons. They have enough understanding of each other's characteristics, preferences, and needs, and their relationship has become closer and closer in more and more frequent exchanges. In the end, combining two into one has become an inevitable choice. The author said that this version of mergers and acquisitions is his favorite version. It is not a hasty marriage, nor a marriage of convenience, but a gradual coming together through little contacts. Whether it is emotionally, collaboratively, or economically, it is an appropriate decision. And the facts have proved this. Fisher and GM have always maintained a harmonious cooperation and lived happily together in the next few decades. Now, let's recap the highlights. The interpretation of this issue is divided into three parts: life, work, and love. In the first part, we are talking about how the diversified investment strategy in finance can help us manage risks in our lives. For example, in the early stages of life, we can choose to disperse and invest our energy, try to get in touch with a variety of learning fields, keep observing which field has the highest rate of return for investing energy, and then tilt towards this field. Also, when building a network of interpersonal relationships, you should consciously devote some time and energy to get in touch with people who are in different circles, industries, and ideas from yourself. And you should distinguish between high beta assets, low beta assets, and negative beta assets in your life, and pay more attention to those friends who can tide over the difficulties with us and are willing to give charcoal in the snow. In the second part, we are talking about what inspirations the perspectives on value creation in finance can bring to our work. We understand that every money manager has to face a cruel but true logic, that is, if your returns just meet investors' expectations, then you have not created any value beyond the cost of funds. At work, we can also refer to this perspective. An ideal value creator should be able to continuously bring benefits greater than expected. To do this, we must not only work hard to generate revenue, but also learn to manage the expectations of our bosses, and at the same time, we must remember to continuously invest in ourselves and accumulate wealth. In the third part, what we are talking about is what truths about love can we see from the cases of corporate mergers and acquisitions in the financial market. We have seen the failure cases of mutual use and hasty marriage. We have also seen the successful cases of long-term love and mutual affection. In addition to these, The book also mentions what risk management concepts are embodied in the two financial instruments of insurance and options, what value concepts are embodied in the financial asset pricing model, and the conflict of interests between the company's shareholders and managers. Friends who are interested in these issues can click on the ebook at the end of the manuscript for further reading. In addition, in the book, the author also mentioned that in modern society, when people mention finance, they often associate it with endless material desires, so many people have a little rejection of finance. The author understands this point, because finance does have great power to foster people's ambitions. But at the same time, we should not forget that in essence, finance is just a tool invented by human beings to pursue a better life. The tool itself has no position, nor is it good or bad. The key lies in how we use it. And in this book, we see that finance can also be a good guide for those who want to manage risks in life, create more value in work, and go further in love. At the end of the book, the author mentioned that in front of the New York City Library, there are many plaques engraved with famous quotes from writers from all over the world. One of them said, in fact, there are only 2 or 3 stories in people's lives, but they keep repeating. Just like these larks, singing the simple 5 notes every day, for thousands of years, as always. The pursuit of profit and endless desire, and some stories are about caring for friendship, hard work, and nourishing love. But in our life, what kind of story to write and what kind of pen and ink to use are our own choices. This is the end of this episode of the show. What do you think about it differently? Welcome to leave a message to discuss with everyone. Hey, if you like our channel, please subscribe us. Haha, remember to like it.